The decision did not arrive with a public ceremony, a televised address, or the sound of applause. It came inside a sealed palace file, carried through a silent corridor, and placed before three people whose lives were about to change. Prince William had made his choice. Meghan's remaining royal patronage rights were to be transferred to Sophie, and the order was final. What followed was not merely an administrative reshuffle. It was a devastating declaration of trust. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William understood exactly what his signature would unleash. The formal palace order transferred Meghan's remaining patronage rights, ceremonial associations, and representational responsibilities to Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. A royal patronage was not simply a name printed on an official program. It represented the Crown's public support for an organization and gave the chosen royal the authority to appear, speak, and build relationships on the monarchy's behalf. Removing that privilege meant removing visible royal confidence. The prince sat alone before the final page and read the decisive paragraph once more. His pen hovered above the paper. Meghan was his brother's wife, and he knew the order would reopen wounds that had never truly healed. Yet retreat would suggest that royal responsibility could remain suspended forever. William signed, set the pen down, and authorized the transfer. Meghan received confirmation through a private call from a senior palace liaison. She asked for the wording to be repeated, as though the first version had been impossible to absorb. When the official read the sentence again, her voice hardened. She lowered the phone and remained silent for several seconds, understanding that the decision had not merely reassigned duties. It had declared who the institution trusted to carry them. Sophie had not been surprised by the order itself. Weeks earlier, she had received a confidential briefing explaining which organizations would be affected and why continuity had become urgent. The trusted confidant agreed only after receiving written assurance that the transfer served those institutions rather than a private rivalry. She accepted the burden, but she refused to treat another woman's loss as a personal victory. Then the final clause emerged. William's order stated that the transferred rights could not automatically return to Meghan through negotiation, reconciliation, or a future change in palace leadership. The wording turned a painful decision into a lasting settlement. Charles received his copy only after the authorization had been completed. The king read his son's signature and realized there was nothing left to debate. But while Meghan absorbed the humiliation from thousands of miles away, the deeper drama was unfolding inside the family. Because William, Sophie, and Charles each understood that this order carried a different personal cost. Behind the language of duty stood three people trapped by very different loyalties. William believed the monarchy could no longer survive on unfinished arrangements. Sophie understood that accepting the role might make her the target of resentment she had never invited. Meghan saw the transfer as something far more painful than the loss of ceremonial duties. To her, it marked the palace's final judgment on everything she had once hoped to become within the royal family. William carried the burden as the future king, determined to build a working structure the crown could depend on. A royal patronage was an official relationship between a member of the family and a public organization, giving that person the responsibility to represent its work and lend it royal support. To him, those roles could no longer remain attached to someone living far away, rarely present, and no longer accountable to palace expectations. Every empty arrangement weakened the institution he would one day inherit. Sophie understood why he had chosen her, but that did not make acceptance easy. She had spent years taking difficult assignments, attending quiet engagements, and supporting causes that brought little attention. Her strength came from reliability, not ambition. During a private conversation with Edward, she folded her hands tightly and admitted that the transfer might look like a personal victory over Meghan. The trusted confidant told her husband that she did not want duty to be mistaken for revenge. Edward answered that refusing the responsibility would not remove the pain. It would only leave the organizations trapped in uncertainty. Meghan felt that uncertainty disappear in the harshest possible way. After ending the palace call, she walked toward Harry and said the order seemed designed to erase the final official proof that she had ever held a meaningful place within the monarchy. He watched her closely, aware that every response carried danger. Harry wanted to defend his wife, yet he also understood that anger alone could not restore what William had reassigned. William had drawn that line deliberately. In a confidential note attached to the order, the prince wrote that any private reconciliation with Harry must remain separate from official representation. The documented wording revealed his true position. Family bonds could still be repaired, but constitutional responsibility, the duty to act publicly on behalf of the crown, could not depend on emotion. Charles recognized the shift immediately. The final file requested his acknowledgement, not his approval. The king set the document down and remained silent, realizing that his eldest son was no longer waiting to be guided through every decision. And when officials traced the decision back to that single ceremony, they discovered the precise moment when hesitation ended, and William quietly decided that Meghan's royal position could no longer remain suspended between two worlds. Every royal rupture has a moment that appears insignificant until history gives it meaning. In this case, the turning point came during a national charity anniversary at St. James's Palace, where Meghan's name still appeared beside a patronage she no longer actively represented. A question from one nervous organizer, followed by a long silence from palace officials, exposed the contradiction in public. William witnessed the confusion personally, and from that moment, the unresolved arrangement had an expiration date. The tension surfaced at the 50th anniversary reception of the Commonwealth Youth Arts Foundation. A royal patron was the senior public figure formally linked to an organization, expected to support its work, attend key events, and provide visible legitimacy. The event chair approached William and asked whether Meghan intended to resume that role or send a recorded message. It was a simple question, yet no one around the prince seemed able to answer it. William looked down at the printed program and saw her name still displayed as patron. Meghan had not attended, contacted the organizers, or approved any contribution, while Sophie stood nearby as a guest, without the authority to speak for the foundation. The future king closed the program slowly and promised the chair that the palace would provide a definitive answer. His voice remained steady, but an aide later noted in a documented briefing that his jaw tightened before he left the conversation. Sophie soon felt the contradiction herself. Several young performers approached her with excitement, believing she now represented the charity. She corrected them gently and explained that she had no official authority over its work. Their enthusiasm faded into confusion, and the trusted confidant felt embarrassed by a structure she had not created but was now expected to defend. William demanded an explanation after the reception. His advisors revealed that the foundation had already sent 3 formal letters asking who possessed decision-making authority. Each request had been delayed because palace officials feared that a clear answer might provoke another family dispute. The prince understood then that caution had stopped protecting relationships and started harming the institutions caught between them. Another revelation made the choice even harder. A private proposal had previously offered Meghan an honorary connection without active royal status. She rejected the wording in a documented response because she believed it reduced years of contribution to symbolism without influence. Her refusal was personal, but the uncertainty it created had become public. William left the ceremony with his decision forming. He requested every inactive patronage file linked to Meghan and ordered advisors to prepare a permanent redistribution plan. Delay had finally become more dangerous than action. The anniversary reception had exposed the problem, but paperwork alone could not settle the emotions behind it. And before William signed the final order, he chose to confront Meghan directly. There were no advisors speaking for them, no carefully arranged public smiles, and no ceremonial language to soften the impact. William and Meghan faced one another through a private video call, separated by distance but connected by years of unresolved resentment. He entered the conversation determined to discuss responsibility. She entered believing the decision had already been made. Within minutes, the patronages became secondary. The real confrontation was about belonging, rejection, and who had the right to define royal service. William took the call alone from a private room at Kensington Palace. Meghan joined without staff, and both agreed that no recording or written transcript would be created. Kensington Palace was the working base used by senior members of the royal family, which made the conversation official in purpose, even without witnesses. The privacy removed every excuse. Neither could blame an aide, a briefing note, or a misunderstood message for what followed. The prince spoke first. He explained that a royal patron, the family member formally assigned to support and represent an organization, had to maintain regular contact, attend important engagements, and work within an accountable palace structure. The current arrangement, he said, had become unfair to charities left waiting for answers. Meghan listened without interrupting, but her restraint only made the tension sharper. Meghan finally asked whether attendance was truly the issue, or whether William had already decided she no longer deserved any place in the royal story. Her voice stayed controlled, though her eyes filled as she waited. The future king refused to answer emotionally. He told her that he was not erasing her past, but past service could not create permanent authority when present duties remained unfulfilled. William removed his glasses and placed them beside him. He admitted that the decision would hurt Harry, and that knowledge had delayed him longer than he wanted to confess. Meghan replied that pain seemed to matter only when it reached someone still inside the palace. Then she named Sophie before he could. The certainty in Meghan's question revealed that fragments of the plan had already reached her through private contacts. William did not deny it. He confirmed that the trusted confidant would receive the patronages because she had accepted both the workload and the restrictions attached to them. Meghan answered that reliability had become a polite royal word for obedience. William said discipline was not obedience when organizations depended on it. Neither raised their voice, yet the distance between them widened with every sentence. Meghan ended the call by saying that a document might remove a title from a program, but it could never decide how history remembered the people involved. Then the screen went dark. The call ended, but the decision survived it, and behind William's certainty stood a powerful system of advisors, precedents, and royal authority that had already prepared for every objection. William's signature carried emotional force, but it did not stand alone. Behind the order was a carefully constructed chain of authority involving palace lawyers, private secretaries, charity agreements, and the king's constitutional household. Every clause had been designed to survive resistance, yet the most revealing moment did not occur in a legal meeting. It came when Charles asked his son one quiet question: was this truly necessary, or had the family simply stopped trying? William knew the order had to rest on more than personal judgment. Palace advisors had already concluded that royal patronages were not private possessions that could remain with someone forever. A patronage was an official relationship connecting a working royal to an organization supported by the crown. When that person no longer performed active duties, the responsibility could be reassigned to protect the charity, its public standing, and the people depending on its royal representative. Charles had gradually given his eldest son greater oversight of long-term working royal planning. That responsibility allowed the prince to shape how official duties were divided among active family members and to decide which arrangements could no longer survive in name alone. The king had intended the delegation to prepare William for future leadership. Now he was discovering how painful that preparation could become when authority touched family wounds. Charles met his son without aides and asked whether another solution might preserve Meghan's symbolic connection. He did not sound furious. He sounded tired. The monarch feared that every official separation made private reconciliation with Harry more difficult, and he wondered whether the institution was protecting itself at the cost of permanently dividing those closest to him. William opened a folder containing unanswered requests, cancelled appearances, and approvals delayed for months. He told his father that protecting personal feelings could not mean forcing charities to live with uncertainty. The future king argued that compassion toward family became unfairness when organizations were left without leadership, access, or clear answers. Sophie had also placed limits on her acceptance. In a documented response to the palace briefing, she agreed to take the patronages only if the announcement emphasized continuity of service rather than punishment or personal promotion. The trusted confidant would accept the workload, but she would not allow Meghan's loss to be used as a celebration of her own rise. Charles read the evidence again. Then the king signed the acknowledgement page without congratulating William. He simply warned that leadership sometimes meant becoming the person everyone blamed. Staff moved immediately. They contacted the affected organizations, revised future schedules, and began preparing Sophie for responsibilities that would alter her public standing overnight. Once the king's signature appeared beneath William's order, the conflict moved from private rooms into real lives, and Sophie became the first person forced to carry the consequences in public. The transfer became real, not when the document was signed, but when Sophie entered a meeting that had once belonged to Meghan. A nameplate had been changed. A briefing folder waited beside her chair. Across the ocean, the former patron received the same announcement through a formal email. Two women looked at the identical decision from opposite sides of royal life, one being asked to step forward, the other being told that the door behind her had finally closed. Sophie entered the closed briefing with representatives from the Commonwealth Youth Arts Foundation, the organization whose anniversary reception had exposed the unresolved arrangement. The palace had already informed every affected charity that she would now oversee official visits, strategic discussions, ceremonial appearances, and future royal endorsements. A royal endorsement was the Crown's formal public support for an organization or campaign, often bringing attention, credibility, and access that ordinary publicity could never provide. The trusted confidant opened the first folder and found Meghan's old notes still inside. Some pages contained questions for young performers, reminders about regional programs, and personal observations from earlier meetings. Sophie did not throw them away. She asked that every useful contribution be preserved, because taking responsibility for the future did not require pretending the past had never existed. Her choice surprised the officials around the table and quietly changed the atmosphere. Meghan read the palace email twice before closing her laptop. The message described the transfer as organizational continuity, language that sounded calm, efficient, and almost painless. To her, it felt like another form of erasure. Harry later found his wife sitting alone and listened as she said the palace had reduced a personal loss to an administrative improvement. He understood her anger, but he also knew that public fury could deepen the damage. Clarity brought immediate consequences. During a private conversation after the meeting, the foundation director told Sophie that several major projects had been delayed because no one knew who possessed authority to approve royal participation. Her appointment released stalled funding discussions and allowed postponed events to move forward. The success proved William's argument, yet it also made Meghan's removal feel more final. Meghan's advisors prepared a draft statement accusing the palace of wiping away her contribution. Harry urged restraint. He warned that attacking the transfer might turn Sophie into an enemy, even though she had not created the decision. Sophie reached her own conclusion that evening. She told Edward that accepting the patronages was not enough. Before appearing publicly, she needed to speak directly with Meghan. That choice created the first genuine possibility of understanding, because when Sophie contacted Meghan privately, neither woman had William, Harry, or palace officials standing between them. For the first time since the order was signed, the struggle stopped being about William's authority or palace procedure. Sophie and Meghan spoke woman to woman, without husbands, advisors, courtiers, or public statements shaping the conversation. One had inherited the responsibilities. The other had lost the rights attached to them. Neither expected forgiveness. Yet in the silence between their carefully chosen words, both recognized that they had been placed on opposite sides of a decision larger than either of them. Sophie made the call herself from home, refusing to let a private secretary arrange it. A private secretary was the senior aide who normally handled official communication and protected a royal from difficult exchanges. This time, she wanted no barrier. Meghan answered after several rings, surprised to hear the Duchess's voice rather than another carefully prepared palace message. For a moment, neither woman knew how to begin. Sophie spoke first. She said she had never campaigned for the patronages and would not have accepted them if the charities had been functioning properly under the existing arrangement. The trusted confidant explained that delayed decisions, unanswered requests, and uncertain leadership had left real organizations unable to move forward. She did not say this to excuse William. She said it because Meghan deserved to hear the reason directly. Meghan listened, then admitted where the deepest wound truly lay. Losing the work was painful, but being replaced by another royal woman felt like a deliberate comparison. To her, the message seemed brutally simple. Sophie had succeeded where she had failed. The former patron said the palace had not merely reassigned responsibilities. It had created a public contrast between obedience and rejection. Sophie refused that rivalry. Her voice trembled slightly, as she promised never to speak negatively about Meghan's earlier work, or allow palace briefings to present the transfer as a personal victory. She admitted that the process must feel humiliating, and said duty could not become an excuse for cruelty. The honesty changed something. After the call ended, Meghan instructed her team not to release the prepared statement, accusing Sophie of helping erase her contribution. She remained furious with William, but for the first time, she separated the Duchess from the decision. Sophie acted as well. In a documented request to the foundation, she asked that projects launched during Meghan's tenure remain permanently recorded in its official history. The palace soon learned there would be no public attack on the new patron, and the confrontation many expected never came. The private call did not restore Meghan's rights, but it changed the emotional meaning of their transfer, and when the announcement finally reached the public, the world saw more than a royal reshuffle. By sunrise, a private royal decision had become a national argument. Some saw William's order as ruthless proof that the monarchy was closing its doors on Meghan forever. Others viewed it as long overdue clarity for charities abandoned in constitutional uncertainty. Sophie's name dominated broadcasts, while Meghan's photograph returned to front pages across Britain and America. Yet one moment outside Buckingham Palace captured the public mood more powerfully than any commentator. Two women holding opposing newspapers stood together, reading the headlines in silence. Buckingham Palace released a carefully worded statement, confirming that Sophie would assume the patronages under the Crown's updated working royal structure. A working royal was a family member who carried out official duties, represented national organizations, and remained accountable to the palace. The statement avoided blame, but its message was unmistakable. Meghan's institutional connection had ended, and the trusted confidant would now carry the responsibilities forward. The media split almost immediately. British broadcasters focused on continuity, public service, and William's growing authority as the future king. American coverage framed the transfer as Meghan's final separation from royal life. The same decision became two different stories, one about stability, the other about rejection, and both interpretations carried enough truth to deepen the division. Sophie faced that storm when she arrived at the Commonwealth Youth Arts Foundation headquarters. Reporters shouted questions about Meghan before she reached the entrance. She paused, clearly tense, then said only that the organizations and the people they served had to come first. Her restraint protected the former patron from direct criticism, but it also confirmed that the transfer would not be reversed. Harry watched the coverage with Meghan and switched off the television when one presenter described the order as the final removal of her royal legacy. He called the language cruel. She remained calm and told him that the palace had finally declared what it had wanted for years. Harry heard the control in her voice, but he also recognized the pain beneath it. The London Sentinel intensified the debate with a split front page. One side showed William authorizing the order. The other showed Sophie greeting young performers beneath the headline, "The Handover. A future king chooses his working royal." Outside Buckingham Palace, one woman held a newspaper praising Sophie, while another carried a headline defending Meghan. They argued briefly, then lowered both papers. The charities deserved certainty, they agreed, even if the family deserved compassion. Public anger slowly hardened into judgment. William had done more than redistribute duties. He had revealed the principle that would shape his future reign. Memory could be honored, but responsibility had to remain active. When the shouting ended, and the headlines moved on, one conclusion remained. William had defined the boundary between royal memory and royal responsibility, and everyone involved had to live with the verdict. In the end, there was no triumphant winner standing above the others. William secured the clarity he believed the monarchy required. Sophie accepted a burden disguised as an honor. Meghan lost the final official rights, connecting her to the role she once imagined would define her future. Charles watched another bridge within his family narrow almost beyond repair. The order succeeded institutionally, but its human cost could not be hidden beneath signatures, titles, or carefully measured palace language. Sophie became the recognized active patron for every affected organization. A royal patron was the family member officially responsible for supporting a charity, attending its major events, and representing its work on behalf of the crown. Her schedules were approved, delayed projects resumed, and decisions that had remained frozen finally moved forward. The charities gained the certainty they had requested, but that stability came only after Meghan's connection had been formally closed. William achieved the principle he had fought to establish. Royal authority, he insisted, could no longer survive through memory or historical association alone. It had to be tied to active duty, physical presence, and direct accountability. The prince had created a standard that would shape the monarchy he expected to inherit, and he knew that one day the same rule might be used to judge everyone around him. William returned alone after the final briefing and closed the patronage file. He placed it inside a cabinet without celebration. The future king understood that the order might have hardened Harry's feelings beyond repair, and the victory felt painfully empty because his institutional success had widened a family wound. Meghan made her own final choice. She refused to launch a public campaign against Sophie or the organizations now working with her. Instead, she privately archived her old patronage materials and accepted that her official royal chapter had ended. Her interpretation of that history remained hers, but the palace would no longer give it active authority. Sophie transformed the handover during her first major address. In a recorded speech to charity leaders, she acknowledged the work completed before her appointment and promised that continuity would never become competition. Her restraint prevented the transfer from turning into a ceremony of humiliation. Charles finally told William that the order had been firm, painful, and unmistakably his. The king now understood that his son was no longer merely preparing to lead. He had begun defining leadership itself. The patronages belonged to Sophie. Meghan's official claim was closed, and William's message stood without qualification. Within the monarchy he intended to lead, service would determine authority, and sentiment would never again be allowed to postpone a final decision. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.